U.S. President Donald Trump is increasingly pushing other countries to support Washington's efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, while postponing his summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping, citing the Middle East conflict. Israel claims to have killed Iran's top security chief Ali Larijani in an overnight airstrike. Iran has yet to confirm the report. The South Korean government remains on heightened alert over the unfolding situation in the Middle East, with President Lee Jae-myung calling for preparations for worst-case scenarios related to the conflict. We're following breaking news of a potential major escalation in the Middle East as Israel claims to have assassinated two top Iranian security officials. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has just announced that Ali Larijani, the secretary of Iran's National Security Council, was killed in overnight airstrikes. However, just minutes before Israel's declaration, Iranian state media reported that Larijani was alive and would shortly be issuing a public message. Meanwhile, the Israel Defense Forces say they have also killed Gholam Reza Soleimani, the commander of Iran's Abbasid paramilitary force. Now, Tehran has not yet given a direct response. In the meantime, though, the conflict in the Middle East is entering a dangerous new phase as Israel officially launches a ground invasion into southern Lebanon. Chung Hae-rim has the details.
Israel's military says its troops have begun what it calls limited and targeted ground operations against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. This action marks a major escalation, expanding Israel's campaign beyond Iran to target one of Tehran's key regional allies. The Israel Defense Forces stated that thousands of troops from its 91st Division are now operating against key Hezbollah strongholds. Sweeping evacuation orders have been issued, telling all residents south of the Litani River to leave the area immediately. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz warned that displaced residents will not be able to return until the threat to northern Israel is fully removed. Meanwhile, the humanitarian toll continues to mount. According to Lebanese authorities, Israeli attacks have killed over 850 people and displaced nearly 1 million residents since the conflict escalated. Israeli officials say the ground operation could last well beyond the current conflict with Iran. The ground offensive follows a massive barrage of rockets and drones fired by Hezbollah into Israel. The Iran-backed group says the attacks were in retaliation for the recent assassination of Iran's supreme leader. Meanwhile, Iran is issuing stern warnings to Washington regarding any direct American military intervention. Speaking in Tehran, Iran's deputy foreign minister strongly cautioned the U.S. against deploying troops.
Look, even suggesting that a foreign country can put boots on the ground of another country, invade another country, occupy the land of another country, is something very much rogue, very reckless, illegal, and against all international law. There is no mandate.
Analysts say the new offensive highlights the growing complexity of the war. Opening another front raises questions about whether Israel can sustain long-term operations across multiple battle zones, especially with largely reservist-based military. With tensions rising and no clear path to de-escalation, concerns are growing that the conflict could evolve into a prolonged regional war. Chung Hae-rim, Arirang News.
And U.S. President Donald Trump has reiterated his request for South Korea and other countries to take part in efforts to secure up the Strait of Hormuz, even citing the number of U.S. troops deployed in South Korea and Japan. Our Kim Bo-kyung reports. U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday once again urged countries, including South Korea, to actively help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking to the reporters at the White House, Trump said the U.S. strongly encourages other nations whose economies depend on the strait to help secure the key oil shipping route.
We get less than 1% of our oil from the strait, and some countries get much more. Japan gets 95%. China gets 90%. Many of the Europeans get quite a bit. South Korea gets 35%. So we want them to come and help us with the Strait.
Trump has accused allies of showing low enthusiasm for the coalition, which he says would matter to him.
Some are countries that we've helped for many, many years. We've protected them from horrible outside sources, and they weren't that enthusiastic. And the level of enthusiasm matters to me.
Later on at his office, he further pressured South Korea and other countries, saying the U.S. have 45,000 troops stationed each in Japan and South Korea and between 45,000 and 50,000 in Germany. Though the exact scale of U.S. troop deployments differs from the facts, as there are about 50,000 in Japan, 28,500 in Korea, and around 35,000 in Germany, his remarks are seen as a way to point out how these countries are hesitating in engaging in military cooperation between the U.S. and Iran. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also stressed the importance of global cooperation to ensure security in the Strait of Hormuz, a move seen as laying the groundwork for an official request at the U.S. government level. This during Rubio's phone talks with his South Korean counterpart Cho Hyun on Monday. The talks were held at the request of the U.S., and Rubio, according to the Foreign Ministry, asked for support and interest to bring peace and stability to the region. Earlier, the Blue House had kept a cautious stance regarding this issue during Monday's briefing, saying it needs sufficient deliberation between Seoul and Washington. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Trump has also asked to postpone his upcoming trip to Beijing, originally scheduled for later this month. However, U.S. officials have dismissed the speculation that the delay is linked to efforts to pressure China over security in the Strait of Hormuz. Oh Soo-young reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he has asked China to delay his planned visit to Beijing by about a month. Speaking at the Oval Office on Monday, Trump said he still wants to travel to China, but feels he needs to remain in the United States while the Middle East conflict continues. White House spokesperson Carolyn Leavitt said earlier in the day that the dates may be moved as Trump prioritizes overseeing the U.S. military operation against Iran. The Beijing trip had been scheduled for March 31st to April 2nd for talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping that had been expected to help stabilize the rocky relations between the world's two largest economies. This comes amid tensions around the Strait of Hormuz, as Iran has threatened to set fire on vessels transiting the vital waterway. Trump has urged several countries, including China, to help protect commercial shipping in the strait, but Beijing has not directly responded. Still, preparations for a potential Trump-Xi summit have continued. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng held 2 days of talks in Paris aimed at preparing possible agreements on rare earth supply chains and expanded Chinese purchases of U.S. farm goods. Wrapping up the talks on Monday, Bessent said if the summit is delayed, it wouldn't be due to war politics, but logistics.
If the president's visit is postponed, it would have nothing to do with the Chinese making a commitment to the Straits of Hormuz. It would obviously be in their interest to do so, but a postponement would not be as a result of any ask from the president not being met. The postponement, if it happens, would be because the commander-in-chief of the United States military believes that he should stay in the United States while this war is being prosecuted.
Beijing said Monday that the two sides remain in contact regarding Trump's visit.
Heads of state diplomacy plays an irreplaceable role in providing strategic guidance for China-U.S. relations. China and the U.S. are in communication regarding President Trump's visit to China.
The spokesperson did not respond directly to questions about Washington's call for assistance in the strait. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
While President Donald Trump continues to push for a coalition against Iran, key U.S. allies, particularly in Europe, remain hesitant to become involved. Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
Several key U.S. allies said Monday they have no immediate plans to send naval forces to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, pushing back against President Donald Trump's request for military support to keep the vital waterway open. Trump had called on partner nations to help police the strategic strait after Iran responded to joint U.S.-Israeli strikes with drones, missiles, and naval mines, effectively shutting down tanker traffic through the narrow channel. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most critical energy choke points, normally carrying about 1/5 of global oil shipments, as well as large volumes of liquefied natural gas. European leaders signaled clear reluctance to involve NATO in the escalating conflict. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz made it clear on Monday that Germany would not take part in the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran.
Like the United States and Israel, we want to see an end to Iran's nuclear and missile programs, but we will not take part in this war. We have said this from day one. That remains the position of the federal government.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer also rejected suggestions that the military alliance could be used to secure shipping routes through this strait, reinforcing a broader European stance against expanding NATO's role in the crisis.
We will protect our people in the region. Second, while taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war. And third, we will keep working towards a swift resolution that brings security and stability back to the region.
The pushback comes as tensions grow between Washington and its European allies over how far the alliance should be drawn into the conflict, which has now entered its third week. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
So, with the war in the Middle East and now into its third week, President Lee Jae-myung has urged his officials to prepare for the worst-case scenarios from the prolonged conflict. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Preparing for the worst-case scenarios stemming from a possible prolonged conflict in the Middle East. That was the message from President Lee Jae-myung on Tuesday as he presided over the weekly cabinet meeting at the government complex in Sejong, noting that oil prices have started to stabilize since a price cap was implemented. But he warned of further uncertainties.
중동 상황이 당초 예상을 뛰어넘는 방향으로 확대되고 있습니다. 현재와 같은 양상이라면 잠시 진정됐던 석유 가격이 다시 불안정해지고 민생 전반에 가해질 충격도 커지게 될 것 같습니다.
He called on officials to supervise prices on site to make sure the price cap is actually reflected at the gas pumps, as some cases have been reported where oil refiners and gas stations raised prices despite the new rule.
We will impose strict punishment on any violation of the oil price cap and the false reporting of supply prices.
On top of that, President Lee emphasized the need to find alternative energy supplies.
UAE에서 추가 원유를 확보했던 것처럼 우리의 외교 역량과 자산을 총동원해서 안정적인 추가 대체 공급선 발굴에 총력을 기울여야 되겠습니다.
He mentioned the possibility of temporarily limiting the use of private vehicles and placing export controls on certain items if necessary. He also instructed the cabinet to swiftly organize an extra budget.
전쟁 추경이 신속하게 집행될 수 있도록 다각도로 노력해 주시기 바랍니다. 결국은 소득 지원 정책을 안 할 수가 없을 것 같은데 이번 추경을 한다면 그럴 때도 아주 지방에 더 대대적으로 할 수 있게.
Balancing out development across all regions of the country was also on the agenda as the meeting took place in the administrative city of Sejong. Additionally, the cabinet approved a bill aimed at implementing U.S. investment worth $350 billion, for which a strategic investment corporation will be established. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Also today, President Lee Jae-myung has called on the police to fulfill their duty of dedication to serving the people. He attended an appointment event on Tuesday for new police officers, saying that all police authority comes from the trust of the people. He said law enforcement should be exercised in an accurate, fair, and transparent manner to secure a just outcome, adding that action by each and every police officer sets a criteria for enforcing the law. Now, his remarks come amid a readjustment of power between the prosecution and police. South Korea's ruling Democratic Party plans to pass a key legislation on prosecutorial reform at the upcoming plenary session. DP Chairman Chung Chung-lee announced at a press conference on Tuesday that the ruling bloc had reached a coordinated agreement on bills to establish a new major crime investigation office and also a public prosecution office. According to the party leader, the core principle of those bills is a strict separation between investigative and prosecutorial powers, designed to prevent prosecutors from intervening in investigations. The plan would also remove special privileges associated with prosecutors. Now, following a parliamentary subcommittee review, the bill is to be reviewed by the National Assembly's Legislation and Judiciary Committee before being submitted to the plenary session on Thursday. The DP's party leader also emphasized that the ruling bloc had fully aligned on the proposal and added that it hopes that the reform would end the controversy over prosecutorial power. As the Middle East conflict continues and pressure builds from Washington to join forces in securing the Strait of Hormuz, attention is now turning to South Korea's National Assembly. Lawmakers are weighing up both the legal implications of a possible troop deployment and how to support the economy through legislation. For more, our political correspondent Moon Hae-ryun joins us in the studio. Welcome back, Hae-ryun.
Good evening, Tammy.
So, Hae-ryun, let's start with the deployment itself. What role does the National Assembly play here?
So under South Korea's constitution, any overseas deployment of troops requires assembly approval. There is, however, a past precedent that is now being closely revisited. In 2020, the government expanded the operational range of the Cheonghae unit, a naval anti-piracy force from the Gulf of Aden to the Strait of Hormuz, without holding a new vote in parliament. At the time, the government argued that an existing mandate allowed for flexibility in emergency situations. But lawmakers say the situation is fundamentally different. Unlike 2020, the current environment is being viewed as an active conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. That raises the possibility that any deployment could be interpreted as direct military involvement rather than a limited mission to protect shipping. Because of that, both ruling and opposition lawmakers are increasingly aligned in their view that a new parliamentary vote would likely be required if troops are sent.
This is a major decision involving the possible deployment of our troops to a region with a high risk of combat. It appears to be a matter that requires the National Assembly's consent in accordance with the Constitution and the law.
So the Assembly's consent in accordance with the Constitution would be crucial to deploy any troops to the area. Now, politically, how is the National Assembly handling the situation at the moment?
So thus far, the political response has been cautious but active behind the scenes, and lawmakers from both parties are currently refraining from taking a firm public stance on deployment, saying that they'll wait for a formal request from the United States and assess the government's strategy first. But at the same time, the Assembly is not standing still. A special task force has been set up by the ruling party and the government to coordinate a broader response to the Middle East conflict, with lawmakers participating in discussions on both security and economic measures. Through this task force, parliamentarians are being briefed on developments in real time, including energy supply risks, financial market volatility, and contingency planning. This reflects a growing recognition within the Assembly that this is not just a foreign policy issue, but a multi-layered challenge that could require swift legislative action.
Indeed, and we also have to talk about the economic impact. What role is the National Assembly playing to ease the energy prices?
So on the economic front, too, the National Assembly is preparing for a significant legislative response. Lawmakers are working with the government on measures to stabilize energy supply, including a plan to release more than 22 million barrels of strategic oil reserves over the next 3 months. But the bigger focus in Parliament is a supplementary budget, which is expected to be submitted by the government later this month. This extra budget will be aimed at cushioning the broader economic shock from rising oil prices. Key measures are likely to include fuel cost relief for consumers, expanded energy subsidies for vulnerable households, and financial support for small businesses and exporters facing higher logistics and production costs. Lawmakers are expected to scrutinize how the budget is structured, including its size, funding sources, and how quickly it can be implemented, as concerns grow over the potential for prolonged instability in global energy markets.
The speed of preparing a supplementary budget to minimize the impact on people's livelihoods and the economy is extremely important. We need to carefully examine the burden of high oil prices, as well as support for vulnerable groups, small businesses, farmers, and exporters, and come up with detailed measures.
Ultimately, the National Assembly is emerging as a key decision-making arena in shaping how the country responds to the Middle East conflict.
Indeed, we'll see how the National Assembly will manage and play a role in handling the situation in the Middle East. Hae-ryun, thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Oil prices pulled back, bringing a sense of relief to the markets. Now, that shift carried into Seoul, with the domestic stocks closing higher and the Korean won also strengthening. Kim Jun-hong reports.
South Korea's financial markets showed signs of relief on Tuesday, with the benchmark index posting strong gains despite ongoing uncertainties in the Middle East. The Kospi closed higher at 5,640.48, led by strong gains in large-cap stocks, as buying in semiconductor and auto shares lifted the overall index. The Kosdaq ended slightly lower, but saw an intraday rebound driven by net retail buying. Meanwhile, the Korean won strengthened slightly, closing at 1,493.6 per dollar, down 3.91 from the previous session. The rally appears to have been driven in part by a recent drop in oil prices, which have been a major source of market swings.
Domestic stocks have been moving in line with oil prices. The recent decline in crude, driven by hopes for a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, helped fuel the rebound, with institutional buying and a slowdown in foreign outflows, adding further support.
Wall Street rebounded overnight to finish higher after posting broad losses in the previous session. Major indexes rose, posting gains of roughly 1%. The gains were largely driven by a pullback in oil prices. Brent crude slipped back toward the $100 level on Monday, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude fell more than 5%. The decline came as reports of ships from countries including India and Pakistan passing through the Strait of Hormuz fueled expectations that the route may reopen. Still, analysts say it remains too early to turn optimistic about the situation in the Middle East, with oil prices likely to stay a key driver of market moves for now. Kim Jun-hong, Arirang News.
A trailer for a documentary about mega-hit boy band BTS and the making of their new album has been released on Tuesday. The film, titled BTS The Return, features scenes from the group's world tours and the process of working on new songs in Los Angeles. In the trailer, the numbers reflect on their identity and hint at changes for their upcoming comeback release. The actual documentary film is set to premiere on Netflix on March 27th. A winter wonderland has returned to the mountains of Gangwon-do province with over centimeters of snow, while in the southern regions, spring flowers are blooming in full color. Cha Young-kyung has the story.
The mountain ridges are completely blanketed in white, and snow flowers have blossomed on the branches in place of spring buds. Following the 60 centimeters of heavy snowfall earlier this month, the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province received another 30 centimeters of spring snow. Hiking trails are bustling with people eager to enjoy what might be the final snow trek of the year, while photographers are busy capturing the exotic sight of a snowy landscape at the start of spring.
I took a day off work to come here after hearing the news of the snow. It feels like a winter's final gift.
On the other hand, spring flowers in the south are already reaching their peak. Amidst the unmistakable warmth of spring, red and white apricot blossoms, 매화, are blooming along the Samjingang River. This year, the apricot blossoms opened their petals about a week earlier than usual. The Gwangyang 매화 Festival, which signals the beginning of spring, has officially opened, drawing in the crowds. From the blossom-filled south to the snow-covered peaks of Gangwon-do province, spring and winter are coexisting under the very same sky. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
Tomorrow, we'll see spring rain across the country. It'll begin in the Chungcheongnam-do province and Jeju-do Island early in the morning, before spreading nationwide by late morning. Most of the rain will taper off by the afternoon. Heavier rain is expected along the southern coast, with up to 30 millimeters lasting into the night. On Jeju, rainfall could exceed 70 millimeters through early Friday morning. Tomorrow will remain mostly cloudy across the country. Air quality levels will be bad in the capital areas, Gangwon-do province and the Chungcheong-do provinces, so please take care when heading outdoors. Tomorrow, Seoul will begin the day at 6 degrees Celsius, Daejeon at 5 degrees, Busan at 10 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 11 degrees, while Daegu, Gwangju, Busan all topping out at 13 degrees. For the rest of the week, we'll see typical spring weather with large day-to-night temperature swings continuing. So please take care. Now let's look at the weather around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.